Welcome, everyone, to the PFF Fantasy Podcast. I'm your host, Jon Macri, fantasy analyst here at PFF, and it's Thursday, so we're back to preview another week of exciting fantasy football. And I say we because I am once again joined by the great Kate Magdziuk. Kate, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. My fantasy teams, some of the injuries that they've sustained, not doing so well, but that's why we're here to help everybody else with, Nick Chubb injury, Saquon Barkley injury. There's a lot to navigate. And I think we're going to, do our very best to help everybody's fantasy teams navigate through this crazy week 3. All of the matchups, we're going to talk about, some matchups we're targeting, players we want to avoid. We're going to cover it all in today's episode. And I think the folks are going to like it.
Yeah. I'm excited. It's always fun to kind of preview these games and try to figure out where things are going to go and then see how right we were or how wrong we were once Sunday rolls around. But it's fun nonetheless. But I'm definitely excited to get into this week's slate. We're going to go game by game again. This time I'll try to put the timestamps in the episode's descriptions for both YouTube and audio so that people can find the games they're looking for more easily, and hopefully that helps kind of navigate it too if there's games that you're not as interested in. So that should help. But before we get into it, I do want to give a quick shout out to our presenting sponsor, Fabric by Gerber Life. Fall is all about the back to school and back to routine checklist, and the most important task on that list should be securing your family's financial future, starting with life insurance. Fabric by Gerber Life makes it quick, easy, and affordable to protect your family so you can get back to enjoying life. Fabric was designed by parents for parents to help you get a high-quality, surprisingly affordable term life insurance policy in less than 10 minutes. Fabric has flexible policies that fit your family and your budget with quality policies like $1 million in coverage for less than $1 a day. Get your personalized quote in just minutes and then apply when it's convenient for you. It's all online and on your schedule. You can go from start to covered in less than 10 minutes with no health exam required. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to protect their family. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/fantasy. That's meetfabric.com/fantasy. MEET fabric.com/fantasy. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company, not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions. All right, Kate, let's start it off here with Thursday night football, as we always do. Even though for the most part, this game has been played for the large majority of listeners, we still get to kind of prognosticate a little bit because we haven't seen it yet, but people get to maybe figure out where we were right and wrong a little bit sooner. So no Saquon Barkley for this game, unfortunately. He has been ruled out. Obviously, the short week. He was dealing with the injury late last game, so it wasn't expected that he was going to play. How are you feeling about the Giants' backfield heading into this game, going against the 49ers?
That's a big heck no for me, dog. I am not seeking out this matchup. I know that the Rams somehow found some success against the 49ers in the run game. Kyren Williams finished as the overall RB1 last week against this defense. Again, no idea how it happened, but it happened. That also came on the back of like some significant usage in the receiving game. Mm-hmm. This is just not a matchup that I'm looking to target on any given week whatsoever. I'm hands off, especially I would have concerns about efficiency, even with some of the best backs in the league against this defense, especially so when we don't really know how this backfield is going to shake out. And to be honest, I don't think we can necessarily project them to be in sort of a neutral situation. I think they're going to be playing from behind. You have the Niners 10.5-point favorites in this one. They're probably going to be throwing. They're not going to have a lot of time to run the ball anyway. I'm not digging any of these running backs. I feel like even in the most desperate of situations, we can find other options elsewhere.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm going to treat last week's Kyren Williams performance against the 49ers as kind of like an outlier, an anomaly so far until we see it from multiple backs or multiple games, because typically we know this 49ers defense is very good, especially against the run. And yeah, I think there will be more passing. And even then, it's not a great matchup for the Giants wide receivers. The 49ers have been a zone-heavy defense. They've allowed just 4.76 yards per coverage snap while in zone this season, which ranks 4th best in the league. And then the Giants wide receivers, too, the starters at least, because Jalen Hyatt's been fine, but they've all posted below average fantasy points per route run against zone coverage through 2 games this season. So it's hard to get too excited about a lot of the Giants' fantasy options in this one, including Daniel Jones and the other passers,
Yeah,
receivers.
unfortunate timing to have a really exciting week for Daniel Jones. Finished as the overall RB1 or QB1 in week 2. So unfortunate that we have to come right out of the gate into this kind of matchup. This is going to be a defense that's going to be able to force some turnovers against this offense in particular. I just think this is going to be a disaster on both sides of the ball. Now, also worth noting, Brandon Ayuk managing an injury, so not sure if, I don't know that he's 100% going to play. It sounds like he is. He was listed as questionable. Could be an interesting spot to utilize, Deebo Samuel a little bit more. We've seen Brandon Ayuk be kind of a featured asset here, and maybe we see a really heavy Deebo Samuel game, or maybe, just maybe, we see a little bit of George Kittle. Either way, I think, maybe this is going to be, one of these games where this can be an offense where they can coast it out and take their foot off the gas maybe a little bit early in this one.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying, yeah, for sure. And look, Brandon Ayuk, I was so excited about him for this matchup specifically, but it's hard with that shoulder injury now because he's still questionable. I believe he hasn't been ruled out or anything. It feels like he might play or give it a go, but he's been like the best wide receiver in the league against man coverage this year, and the Giants are a man heavy defense as well. So it was like really a perfect matchup that for him to kind of dominate this season. I think he's earned the highest receiving grade against man. He's got where did I put this? Yeah, he's been one of the best receivers as far as fantasy points per route run against man coverage as well. So it would have been a nice matchup, but I'm with you. I think there's potential for somebody else to kind of step in there, whether it's Deebo Samuel or George Kittle. I think I'm starting those guys pretty much no matter what, because I have confidence in the 49ers offense against this Giants defense right now.
Yeah, I think that honestly is where we can end this game here, because
Yeah,
you know what, honestly, I don't even know how long the football world is going to last watching this matchup, because this has the marks of like a tried and true beatdown, which does mean now that we're, projecting a beatdown against the Giants, probably means we're going to see something totally wacky like we did in week 2, but not the most exciting game on the slate, unfortunately, for NFL scheduling.
Yeah. They like to do that on Thursday Night Football.
They do.
Yeah, they always give us a few stinkers in there throughout the year just so that they can take advantage of the views there. They know we're going to watch anyways, but we might not watch the whole thing.
Keep us humble.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's move on to the Sunday slate then, and we will talk about the New Orleans Saints at the Green Bay Packers. So little bit of a tougher matchup for the Packers passing offense this week. The Saints have been a top 10 coverage team so far this season. They've been among the better teams at limiting scoring for their opponents overall. We've been riding the Jordan Love train, which has worked out fine so far. I do wonder if we keep riding here, if like Christian Watson's back, or Aaron Jones, or David Bakhtiari, all three, one of the three, two of the three, none of the three. But I'm just slightly less confident, I guess, about Love than I was the past 2 weeks. How about you? How are you feeling about the Packers offense for this one?
Yeah, not so excited. I know we've seen some exciting performances. Jordan Love, QB3 in week 1, followed up with QB15 performance against the Falcons. The biggest issue is that he's ranked bottom 5 in passing yards among quarterbacks. A lot of that production has come off the fact that he's thrown 3 touchdowns in both of his 2 games. Hasn't been overly efficient, but like, again, has made up for his efficiency or inefficiency as a passer. Hasn't exceeded 56% completion rate in either of these games. Has sort of made up for that a little bit with this passing touchdown production. And I do expect that, especially against the Saints defense, that I think is generally, can be a little bit underrated. I think this might be a spot where we see that some of that touchdown regression. And on the other side of the ball, don't love the defensive matchup for them as well. Like this Packers secondary, I think is much tougher than they're going to be, able to beat on the ground. Like I think this is, a Packers defense that you can generally run behind, but the Saints are in kind of a situation right now with their running backs room. You've got Alvin Kamara, who's suspended for one more game. You have Jamal Williams, suffered a hamstring injury. Doesn't sound like he's going to go. You've got Tony Jones Jr. and you've got rookie Kendre Miller, who has been managing an injury of his own and hasn't played yet. So like a lot of unknowns, but can I tell you who I think is going to emerge as the RB1 in week 3 for the Saints team? Because I think that's where the best matchup for this team will lie against that Packers run defense. The running back you want to own is not a running back, and it is tight end Taysom Hill, who last week saw 9 carries, 75 rushing yards, was super productive on the ground. Like I know Tony Jones got the touchdown, but we might see this offense leaning more towards Taysom Hill given their question marks. Like who are they going to trust? Taysom Hill, who's been a great spot start in the run game, or Kendre Miller, who it seems like never really fully took over that job, despite the fact that I really like Kendre Miller. I think Taysom Hill is the cheat code there to line up in your tight end spot, because there's a non-zero chance he leads the team in carries this week. I wouldn't be surprised.
All right. I love that. Yeah. Love it. Love it. It's part of the reason too why I like Kendre Miller, but I don't love Kendre Miller this week. Like I'm very hesitant about putting him into the lineup, even though this is a pretty good matchup, like you said, for the run game for the Saints. And I think there's a chance that we still see Tony Jones kind of work in there with Kendre Miller kind of coming off the injury. And then, Taysom Hill absolutely has a chance to get in there, get heavily involved. And we saw it a little bit more last week as well, once Jamal Williams was dealing with the injury too. So yeah, this is good. This will be an interesting one to watch, but I'm not going to really be targeting anybody for this game if I can afford to. I'm trying to avoid the running backs. As much of a nice matchup it is, I think you're right. The usage is what could be holding us back here from having a great starter.
Yeah, I'm not excited about anybody on either side of the ball here. I think Chris Olave could see a down week. The Saints offense in general, I think this is going to be kind of a low scoring game. It's in Green Bay. I think both of these defenses are probably a little bit better than we naturally give them credit for. Now, the one big question I think probably most listeners, they're going to be eager to hear about is, what do we do with Christian Watson? So like, obviously, we talked about some of that potential for touchdown regression with Jordan Love. Are you trusting Christian Watson if we see him back in the lineup this week, who's been kind of a boom bust guy, but, was projected as this team's overall, alpha wide receiver, not practicing Thursday. So like, if he does play, you probably expect that he's going to be less than 100%. I think I'm just kind of out on all these wide receivers. How about you?
Yep, I'm feeling the same way with this group here. I think Watson, I think there's a chance that if he does play, I feel like he will. It probably eased in a little bit, not an immediate full workload for him right away. I think in week 1, especially having missed 2 weeks already, that's a bit concerning. So I don't think we get the full workload from him. I think he's still going to see like a high target rate when he's on the field. I just don't know how often he's going to be on the field, right? And that part of it is where I struggled to kind of start a guy like that. We've been sitting him the past 2 weeks. We could probably continue to put in whoever else it was that was in our lineup here in week 3. Because like you said, Saints, they're not an easy matchup either, right? So top 10 in coverage grade, as are the Packers. So both sides, it makes it a little bit tough to trust any of the fantasy weapons here.
Yeah, not a lot of sexy matchups. You know what? I think we should move into like the sexiest fantasy matchup of the week, because we started off here with 2 duds, like Giants, Niners, Saints, Packers, blah. Chargers, Vikings, baby. This is the game of the week. And I want everybody on both sides of the ball in my fantasy lineups. Am I crazy?
No. I was looking at the over-unders today on DraftKings, and this is by far the highest over-under line of the week. And I think we're expecting a shootout here. So I'm 100% with you. I think we're starting the fantasy options on both sides for sure. Kirk Cousins has been the QB1 this season, 2 top 5 finishes to open the year has been pretty crazy. And another positive matchup here. Again, the coverage grade for the Chargers team unit is 3rd worst in the league. just it's going to be a shootout. Yeah, you definitely have to start all of these guys at this point because it's just too good of a matchup. But I mean, the bigger news coming into this one too is that Cam Akers has been traded to the Minnesota Vikings for basically like a bag of hockey pucks, I guess, after it was pretty clear that Sean McVay and company hate him. So, Kate, it's a pretty good matchup again, even for the Vikings run game. So even though they now have like two relatively ineffective backs so far this season, are you rolling with any of these Minnesota running backs heading into this week?
I like Alexander Madison still. I know like folks are going to be totally turned off by Alexander Madison,
Yeah.
given the addition of Akers. Now, this was on a very short week. You know, there is a connection there between Akers and the coaching staff. So they say the verbiage of the offense is relatively similar there, given their history. So like the adjustment for Akers should be a little bit easier, but I still think that this is Alexander Madison's backfield. I feel like this was a solid depth move if you're going to shoot your shot, right? If the Rams are totally done with Akers, which they were, they got an interesting and I think high upside backup running back. If that is the case, Alexander Madison, even though was disappointing in week one and has been inefficient so far this season, he's been playing the bulk of offensive snaps. Like he has been far and away this team's RB1. Haven't seen nearly as much involvement from Ty Chandler as you might have expected based on the inefficiencies for Alexander Madison, especially in this matchup here where there might be some opportunities in the end zone for both of these offenses. I'll trust the running back who's been in the mix here and has gotten more work with this offense, at least recently.
Yeah, I'm with you. Again, I mean, look, I think Alexander Madison, we still roll with him this week. I feel pretty good about it. It's a good matchup, too. The Chargers defensive line ranks 30th in run defense grades so far this season. The Chargers, their defensive line, I think they've totaled just one tackle at or behind the line of scrimmage so far this season. Average depth of tackle at 2.94. So that's eighth worst in the league. So I like the matchup here. And I'm with you. I think this is kind of like, if not like the strike three game, it's one that really Alexander Madison should thrive in, right? Like where we want to see it. We haven't really seen much for the first two games. So it's this third chance that we're giving him here to kind of show us something and be productive. And I think he'll have a chance to do that. I think that usage still remains fairly similar. I don't think Cam Akers is coming in and being the RB1 there in Minnesota. That's just the way I feel. I know there's the connection, like you said, with Kevin O'Connell, but I'm still trusting Alexander Madison for another week here until we see otherwise.
Yeah, I think like if you drafted Alexander Madison and you're not comfortable starting him here in this matchup, then you could probably drop him at this point because like this is going to be, I think, the last chance you really have to see him work as a true workhorse and get the bulk of the carries here. Jordan Addison, love his ability so far. Like hasn't been playing as much as Justin Jefferson. Like he's been kind of slowly worked into the mix here in this offense, but has been super efficient to this point. So I think he's a great start. I think this Chargers secondary is going to give up plenty, especially if they are busy covering Justin Jefferson, which they should be. Obviously, he's a handful. I think that's going to give Addison some more room to make plays. You're obviously starting TJ Hawkinson. On the Chargers side of the ball, anybody stand out as a particular player? Are you going back to the well with Josh Kelly, who, we probably spent a decent chunk of fab, right? Especially if you were an Austin Eckler manager trying to fill that hole, and then comes in and he gets Tennessee tightened, and that didn't work out. Can you trust him back in your lineups again against this defense that I think is a plus matchup? I don't know how much they'll necessarily be running the ball if we do get to surpass that point total of 54 points on the week, where it's set right now. What are we thinking about Joshua Kelly?
Yeah, so this is another one. I think I'm playing him. I know he was the RB, I guess 51 or something like that last week, even though he was RB 12 with Austin Eckler in the lineup in week one. Go figure. But yeah, like you had mentioned, you didn't like the Titans matchup last week as well. So the Vikings one, I feel a little bit better about it. Even if they're not running the ball a lot. Like you said, I think there's going to be opportunity in the red zone near the goal line for this offense to punch the ball in. Minnesota ranks 31st in run defense grade so far this season. They've allowed the fourth most rushing yards on the year as well. Chargers a bit above average in run blocking grade for their offensive line, but it's more the matchup here against Minnesota more than anything. And this potentially being one of those high scoring games, I think there's opportunity for maybe Kelly to punch one in and still be effective on the ground when they do run the ball. So I think I'm starting him. I think I'm starting him where I have him.
Yeah, I'm actually comfortable with that. I like I said last week, that was not a matchup that I'm going to be targeting at any point during the season,
Mhm.
barring some drastic change to that run defense. Just suffocating, stifling for opposing running backs. Not a situation that you even necessarily want to play your workhorses in. Obviously, you always start your studs, but if you're starting a running back against the Tennessee Titans, chances are you're going to see a dip in production and you're not going to be happy.
Yeah, and it was a big dip last week. So
Mm-hmm.
hopefully something to kind of monitor going forward. And we know to not trust that run game against the Titans right now. But yeah, speaking of other strong run defense teams, the New York Jets and the New England Patriots are the next game on the list here. And the Patriots offensive line is another one. They rank 31st in run blocking grade so far this season, where the Jets defensive line is the second highest run defense grade for the year. They've been among the Jets, that is, have been among the top 6 units in defensive run stops and tackles at or behind the line of scrimmage. I think it could potentially be a tougher matchup for Ramondre Stevenson here against the Jets. So a little bit concerned about him. He is averaging exactly 0.0 yards per carry when contacted at or behind the line of scrimmage, which ranks 41st among 47 qualifying running backs. So could be a matchup to avoid for Ramondre Stevenson, or at least temper expectations. What do you think?
Yeah, I honestly, this is not a game that I'm looking to necessarily target on either side of the ball. Once again, one of those matchups you're going to project to be on the lower side in terms of total offensive scoring and production. Ramondre Stevenson, I think the one thing you can probably hold on to maybe in a full PPR format is some of that usage that you've seen in the receiving game. But I think again, this is just one of those matchups. Like you're not starting Mac Jones. You're not starting really any of the wide receivers. Now, the one player to consider, I think, is Hunter Henry, right
Yeah.
now ranked as the tight end 2 in PPR formats. I think like you're not going to want to target this Jets secondary. You're not going to want to target them on the outside, but I do think if there's any sort of like sliver of liability here, it might be over the middle for Hunter Henry to make a little
Yeah.
bit of noise. And we've already seen back-to-back weeks with receiving touchdowns. I think this could be a spot where maybe, Billy Belichick gets, Hunter Henry all involved in this game plan and, just kind of force feeds him throughout the whole matchup, and we're gonna enjoy it. I think so. I don't know.
I like it. I like it. Yeah. And oh man, I'm just laughing at Billy Belichick. I want like a reporter post game to call him Billy, like after a loss or something like that, and see how it goes. But
If looks could kill, I
oh,
don't know. Was it last week? For anybody who didn't see this amazing moment of Bill Belichick, one of my favorite Bill Belichick moments in history, even though it was so simple. He threw a challenge flag and he threw it
oh,
with the most sass and swagger that I've
disgust.
ever,
Like he was
literal disgust on his face. He was like, how
yeah.
dare you get this call wrong? And just the way that he tossed, it was like dismissive of the red flag. Like he had no respect for the NFL. He's like, he was absolutely disgusted. And it was one of my favorite Bill Belichick moments of all time. So I'm going to take that as a sign in that sass and that determination that he had throwing that red flag. I want to see him have the same determination in heavily targeting Hunter Henry in the game plan.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. It was very nice to see Hunter Henry significantly outproduce Kyle Pitts, which you helped convince me of last week, and hopefully
Ooh.
other fantasy managers listen to that one. So yeah, I'm in on Hunter Henry. I'll start him again. 91% route participation last week, so you love that. Patriots have been passing a ton as well, which helps. So like you said, tight end 2 on the year. It's hard to argue him at this point. It's not the most attractive name out there to start at tight end, but the usage is there, the targets are there. I think we just keep rolling with Hunter Henry for now. So how about on the Jets side of things? Breece Hall had made a comment post game last week about why they lost, only getting 4 carries, about something like that. So is it possible that the Jets give us some hope and something to be positive about for this offense, and give the squeaky wheel game for Breece Hall here in week 3?
Maybe he came out with some little speaking of sass, Breece Hall came out with a little bit of sass, subtweeting, his coaching staff with, or sub-Xing, whatever we're going to call it these days, with 4 football emojis, one which represents each of the 4 carries he had in week 2. Yes, I think like there is no reason to continue feeding Dalvin Cook, right? Like,
No.
As I can't remember who said it on Twitter, Dalvin Cook looks cooked. He doesn't look nearly as explosive. Feed Breece Hall. And what I think is really interesting, like despite the fact that this is like the Patriots defense, we actually saw Raheem Mostert have a fantastic game against the Patriots defense. They very much did not look like the Patriots defense we're used to seeing against the run. Raheem Mostert last week, 18 carries, 121 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns. Like that was a point of liability for the Patriots last week. I'm sure Bill Belichick is going to be in the lab trying to figure out what exactly went wrong there. But, Breece Hall, again, with that speed, like it, kind of similar to the speed of Raheem Mostert, except he's, coming off a torn ACL, which is even crazier. I think this could be an opportunity for Breece Hall to get a good amount of work. And I wouldn't be surprised if he continues breaking off these long runs.
Yeah, I'd love to see it. I just hope they give him the ball more, because he's definitely been more explosive coming off an ACL tear than Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook just 2.4 yards per carry so far this season, not getting it done. Speaking of not getting it done, Zach Wilson.
Oh,
This is,
what a transition.
It was good, right? Yeah. If
Amazing.
we're talking about, like Bill Belichick potentially game planning for this one, I mean, all he really has to do is take away Garrett Wilson, who I don't think we're trusting inside the top 24 wide receivers at this point. It's just hard to do. Steve Palazzolo had a great tweet as well. Zach Wilson's career versus the Patriots: 50.9% completion rate, 6.3 yards per attempt, just 2 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and a 35.8 PFF passing grade. So not great for Zach Wilson, as history will tell us, against the Patriots. So it's so depressing, because Garrett Wilson, I loved him coming into the season, but it's so hard to start him at this point. I don't know. Do you feel any better about Garrett Wilson this week?
No.
No. Yeah, I
No.
didn't think so.
No. No. Like if anything, I expect this to get progressively worse throughout the season.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Yep. No, I'm with you. I think we just hold out hope that Breece Hall gives us the positivity that we're looking for in this one. But yeah, not overly excited until we actually see them give him the ball. So let's go to a team that does have a few more exciting options, a little bit. The Texans and the Jacksonville Jaguars is the next game up. And the player that I'm referencing most specifically is Tank Dell. Noah Brown is on IR, but Tank Dell emerged last week and looked great out there. 7 catches for 72 yards and a touchdown. This role, I think even right now, what he had in week 2 has potential to even grow here, and maybe finish the season as the Texans wide receiver 1. What do you think? How do you feel about Tank Dell and the Texans passing offense?
I love Tank Dell. Now, in terms of efficiency, you're not going to be excited about the efficiency here, but through 2 weeks, CJ Stroud ranks 3rd among NFL quarterbacks in overall pass attempts, leads the league with 109 dropbacks in that span. Like, not an ideal situation to put your rookie quarterback in. Like, they've got to fix some things on the back end. They've got to be able to establish the run. But Tank Dell, the jump he took in week 1 to week 2, you saw an increase, route participation rate. Only ran 25 routes in week 1, up to 45 in week 2. You love to see all of that. Nico Collins will probably stick around here as a top target, but I do think, this Tank Dell is just one of these guys that's too talented in terms of his ability to execute route running and generate space, that they're going to scheme to figure out ways to get the ball in Tank Dell's hands. And he might be this one bright spot in what is apparently, for now, a pass heavy offense.
Yeah, that's the thing to love about it, right? They've been so pass heavy that there's volume there. And look, the Jaguars defense is a good one. They're third in PFF coverage grade so far as a team. So it's not like an ideal matchup or anything like that. But like you said, that pass heavy offense there creates enough volume there that should at least make up for it a little bit. And hopefully one of these guys can break one. And CJ Stroud as well, another potential guy to trust in lineups, just again because of the volume, even though it's not an amazing matchup. I don't mind CJ Stroud this week. But yeah, you mentioned running the ball. I mean, Dameon Pierce, even without Mike Boone last week, ceding the passing down work to Devin Singletary and Dare Ogunbowale. Not great for a team that is passing so much. It just leaves little meat on the bone for Dameon Pierce to add much to his production ceiling. So he's been RB43 in PPR in back-to-back weeks. Not great. How you feeling about Dameon Pierce against Jacksonville?
Just wrote Dameon Pierce up in my weekly Time to Panic or Antic article. And spoiler alert, he was a panic for me. I'm not loving what I'm seeing with Dameon Pierce. I really thought this split percentage was going to be much more drastically different. Pierce is still leading the backfield with over 45% of snaps played this season, but Devin Singletary at 29%, Mike Boone 16%. And the biggest concern of all is in quarters 1 through 3, he has led the team with 55% of snaps. But in the fourth quarter, it's Devin Singletary we're seeing. And Pierce, his participation drops down to 29% of snaps. So you don't love that when they're actually in position to maybe, get him involved as a receiver as they're playing catch up, that they're taking him off the field. I'm kind of puzzled because I do think he's far and away the most talented running back. And it seemed like, in terms of the reports coming out of training camp and it seemed like there seemed to be a connection with Dameon Pierce in terms of CJ Stroud in the receiving game. So I just kind of puzzled in general by that, but I don't think we can trust Dameon Pierce as, an option on a week-to-week basis with this kind of volatile usage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been disappointing for sure, and especially for a team that isn't running the ball a ton. There's just not a lot there to love about Dameon Pierce right now heading into week 3. So we'll see if that changes at all in the weeks ahead. But yeah, for now, it's it's probably best to leave him on the benches. But on the Jacksonville side of things, it could be a nice bounce back spot for Calvin Ridley this week. He was, I know, wide receiver 80 last week in week 2 there. So, but the Texans have allowed more offensive success so far this season, at least when they're in man coverage. They rank 27th in yards allowed per coverage snap, and they rank 12th in that regard when in zone coverage. So they do play an even amount of man and zone. So there's potential here for Calvin Ridley to kind of have a big bounce back game. How do you feel about the Jaguars passing offense, and I guess Calvin Ridley specifically for week 3?
I'm not too scared. So I think the biggest question is, with the success that teams are able to establish against this Texans run defense, how much are they going to pass? How much is the volume going to be there? I think it's a fine matchup. It's not a great matchup, but again, I believe in the talent of Calvin Ridley above anything else. In terms of his production, Derek Stingley, I believe, is out with a hamstring. I think he's officially been declared out, so that's going to be good news for this, targeting that secondary there. yeah, I don't mind the matchups here. My biggest question will just kind of be regarding volume. I love Travis Etienne this week. I have him
Mm-hmm.
ranked as I believe at RB4 heading into this week. I think there's some really nice potential that they're going to rack up some yardage. But I mean, Calvin Ridley, you got to start your studs, man, and
Yeah.
he is an absolute stud. And I just don't sit my studs. I can't do it.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't panic after 1 week, especially early in the season, right? So, yeah, you're starting Calvin Ridley pretty much no matter what. The other side is, like you mentioned, yeah, ETN, really nice matchup this week. He didn't get any carries from the goal line last week, but he is getting a little bit more snaps in that situation. So that's been nice to see compared to Tanks Bigsby. I do wonder if they do run the ball near the goal line, if they'll put Bigsby in and that he will get those carries, or if this really means that ETN will get the goal line carries just by being out there. So that's something I think to watch for in this game. And the Texans have been an above average matchup for rushing yards, and they've allowed the most rushing touchdowns in the league so far. So hard not to love ETN this week.
Yeah, absolutely love him. And you mentioned Tank Bigsby. Kind of interesting. Didn't get a single carry last week against the
Mm-hmm.
Kansas City Chiefs, but did actually play some snaps. Saw 19% of offensive snaps, which was only two fewer snaps than he actually saw in week one when he got seven
Right.
carries. So box score a little bit deceiving there. At least he was on the field. Again, didn't get those carries, but you do wonder if this team, like imagine they get ahead. Imagine this is kind of like a steamroll offense over this Houston Texans defense. They have pulled their starters in the past. So,
Mm-hmm.
does the sheer potential of that happening, any chance you're taking a shot on Tank Bigsby in any season long leagues outside of DFS? I do think he's a very interesting play in DFS in case they do get up and pull their starters. I think Tank Bigsby could see a decent amount of work there. If so, eh, anything?
I mean, there's a few deeper leagues where I actually do have him in my starting lineup at the moment, but it's deeper leagues. It's not your typical fantasy league, so it becomes a little bit harder to trust him. But I do like you said, the matchup, the potential for that game script where he can kind of work in. So I feel okay about starting him if I have to, even though last week was obviously a dud with 0 points, but he's like you said, he's still on the field. I think there's still that potential that he could be the goal line that guy there if they choose to run the ball at that point of the field. So I feel fine about Tank Bigsby, I guess is a way of saying it. I think as a second or third flex option, he could potentially find his way into my starting lineup for sure.
I like that. Yeah, I think, yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
I'm just kind of curious. I like
Yeah,
Tank Bigsby and I love
so do
Travis
I.
Etienne. And yeah, I'm not brave enough to actually start him in any of my season long leagues. I've decided, as we were just talking,
Mhm.
but I'm definitely going to get him into some sort of DFS lineup just to scratch the itch because I do have an itch there.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and then look, it's mostly deeper leagues, but it's still, I still feel like pretty okay. I'm not panicked after last week. Basically, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Yeah. I fair.
All right, let's go to the Atlanta Falcons and the Detroit Lions. We got a bit of a triple threat match here of Bijan Robinson versus Jahmyr Gibbs versus the opportunity to touch the ball. Robinson at least still getting decent work because the Falcons run so much and he's dominating the receiving down work. But man, if he starts to dominate the carries as well, he's already RB3 on the year. How long before he's the overall RB1, I guess, is the question here.
Not long. You start Bijan Robinson regardless of matchup, and there's no questions. Where there is questions though in this Falcons offense, Kyle Pitts. What do we
Uh,
do with Kyle Pitts? I genuinely put him on the trade block. See if you can get
mhm.
anything for him at this point, because I think I genuinely believe he's droppable at this point, and that breaks my heart to say because the talent is so anytime he touches the ball, that talent is tangible. Like we know
Yeah.
exactly what he can be. We know his upside, but there is, I think, a huge liability to have Kyle Pitts on your team just based on the fact that, the draft capital kind of eggs you to start him.
Yeah.
And it makes it very hard to justify, playing the waiver wire and playing to certain matchups. You kind of get stuck in the pits with Kyle Pitts. And I don't want to be in the pits with Kyle Pitts. I want to be outside of the pit with, literally any other tight end in the world at this point that's not coached by Arthur Smith.
Yeah, it's super frustrating. I'm with you. I'm not starting him in any way in redraft leagues at this point. I mean, 66% of the offensive snaps so far this year, which is lower somehow than even the previous 2 years. Did have 90% route participation last week, which is nice and all, but just not seeing the targets coming his way on routes as well. So I think he did get an end zone target last week, but Desmond Ridder too just hasn't been able to get him the ball. So just super, super hard to trust Kyle Pitts. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, for Dynasty, he was hard to come by for Dynasty leagues when especially as a rookie. But he's still kind of been, I don't know. I'm still holding him in Dynasty in hopes that, something happens, but at redraft, I'm just not touching him anymore. I'm trying to move on, find better options, whether it's Sam Laporta or Hunter Henry or whoever. I'd rather put those guys in at this point.
That's so heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
You know what tight end has outscored Kyle Pitts in both week 1 and week 2?
Man.
There's a lot of them, but
Yeah,
there's one name in particular. There's one name in particular that I have to bring up because it broke my brain. Colts tight end Kylen Granson has outscored Kyle Pitts in both weeks 1 and week 2. That is not okay. Logan Thomas has outscored, there's a lot of players that have outscored, Kyle Pitts in the first 2 weeks, but those names are pure pain, breaking my brain. Even Durham Smythe, for the Dolphins, has outscored Kyle Pitts in each of the first 2 weeks. You can't start him. And, I do think that playing the matchups is probably going to win you more weeks than Kyle Pitts will at this point. Because for as many weeks as he wins you, he's probably going to lose you twice as many. No.
Yeah. You're right. He absolutely is. And it's just super frustrating. I don't understand why spend the draft capital to get him inside the top 10 to basically not utilize him. Right. So it doesn't make any sense. Hopefully they trade him or something. And Kylen Granson, you just made me think of Kylen Granson. Did you see his social media post about him scoring his first touchdown? That was maybe my favorite social media post of the year. That was amazing. The newborn photo shoot with his first NFL football touchdown was amazing.
I need more of that from everybody in the NFL. Like Kylen Granson, he even got his wife in on some of these photos, had his first football touchdown catch wrapped in a little blanket, and it was moving. It was beautiful.
It was. It really was.
It makes me want to root for more, because I want to see more photo shoots with Kylen Granson and his baby footballs. If every time he had a touchdown, we got a photo shoot.
I want a game where he has 2 touchdowns and then does a twins photo shoot or something like that. Yeah, that's what we need. So we're rooting for Kylen Granson over Kyle Pitts at this point.
I don't think that's a bad play, honestly, at this point. But yeah, Kylen Granson, tight end. He is a tight end 1 technically on this season. So I'm just saying.
Yeah, I like it. Anybody else on Atlanta that you're interested in? I mean, Drake London, any interest there?
He's fine. You like to see him bounce back in week 2, had the touchdown. That's great. But I mean, generally speaking, I think this is just going to be a very volatile offense that, outside of that run game, you're not going to be able to trust any of these guys on a week-to-week basis. It pains me to say that as somebody who is a huge believer in Drake London. He was my wide receiver 1 in that draft class. Love his potential so much, especially as an end zone threat with his size and his athleticism, especially in comparison to that size. But you don't like the fact that Mac Hollins is the leading receiver for the Atlanta Falcons right now. No, thank you.
Yeah, another just a frustrating group altogether. But let's look at the Lions quickly here because maybe an absurd question, but Jahmyr Gibbs or Craig Reynolds is the question that
Ah,
I couldn't
that it's a good
imagine. Like,
question.
yeah, yeah. But it's also like if you would have asked me in the offseason, David Montgomery's now hurt. Are you ready to move Jahmyr Gibbs into the top 10 of running backs? Or are you worried about Craig Reynolds, which is the question basically that we're asking here heading into week 3? How are you feeling about this backfield?
I do think like I have an article coming out tomorrow. Actually wrote up Craig Reynolds as a potential pickup for those of those fantasy managers who need a
Mhm.
last minute ad in a pinch. To the dismay of Jahmyr Gibbs managers, we've actually seen a lot of work for David Montgomery.
Yeah.
And you know what? Once we saw David Montgomery leave the game, Reynolds and Gibbs actually didn't really have a very significant difference in terms of their snap share.
Mhm.
Reynolds had 10 snaps after Montgomery's departure. Gibbs saw 13. You saw Craig Reynolds get 100% of carries on first and second down through the fourth quarter and overtime. I would not be at all surprised to see Reynolds get 12, 15 carries or touches in this game. And, again, you love the upside and you're going to be screaming at your TV the entire time, wondering why they're not getting Jahmyr Gibbs more involved. But, there seems to be some hesitancy there to get him involved on the ground. I don't know if it's because of his smaller frame. He's been getting lots of usage as a receiver. Maybe because of that smaller frame, they feel more comfortable, running the ball with some bigger guys. But I
Yeah.
I actually like I don't think Craig Reynolds is the worst option in the world.
No, it's I don't think it is either. And we talked about this in the recap episode with Nate as well. This is just a team that is unwilling to deviate from their offensive scheme, right? They like their early down guys, they like their pass down guys. It doesn't matter who the personnel is. That's the way that they're kind of deploying these guys. So as much as we prefer the talent of Jahmyr Gibbs way much more than Craig Reynolds, the Lions don't really see it that way. They have specific roles for these guys, and that's the way that they're kind of deploying them. So it is concerning for Jahmyr Gibbs' upside, obviously, but yeah, Craig Reynolds could still be a nice play. We like David Montgomery last week as well, and it worked out because of the volume that he got until he got hurt, obviously. So yeah, I think Craig Reynolds could be a fine play here as well as Jared Goff too, who I think is a decent play in this matchup against the Falcons as well. But yeah, we
Love
can move
Jared
on.
Goff,
Yeah.
especially at home here. I think he's
Mm-hmm.
one of the best plays. If he is on your waiver wire, I think you scoop him up. I think he's got top 6 upside this week. One of the best quarterbacks in the league when he's playing at
Mm-hmm.
home. And
Yeah.
I think that's only going to continue. Reason I'm also kind of interested in Josh Reynolds this week. Had Amon St. Brown miss practice on Wednesday. He's back on Thursday, but listed with a toe injury. So like keep an eye on that. I think he should be fine for Sunday. But in any case where he's limited, like we've actually seen Josh Reynolds be pretty productive in this offense with Jared Goff. They're home. Like things could get crazy with this Lions offense this week. And I think all of them are kind of decent plays, especially in a DFS setting. But, particularly if you are in, some sort of circumstance where your starting assets are injured, I think both of these guys are both Reynoldses. Great subs for your fantasy lineups.
Nice. I like that. Yeah. Start the Reynolds brothers if you can. And we'll, yeah, I like the passing offense here for Detroit. Absolutely. It's a good call. So let's look at the Indianapolis Colts and the Baltimore Ravens. One of the main things here, Anthony Richardson is, I believe, still in concussion protocol. Gardner Minshew has proven that he's a very capable backup, so he can help keep those receiving options like a Michael Pittman afloat at least. But more importantly, we did get Zach Moss RB1 season. Kate, how are you feeling about this after week 2?
I'm so proud. I just want to thank my family for all their support. Thank all my Twitter followers for their support. Yeah, it's been a rocky journey with Zach Moss, but I don't think this is necessarily the best matchup in the world for him. But guess what? does not matter because there is no competition apparently in this backfield for carries. Zach Moss played all but one offensive snap in week 2. That just shows you like how big this team and this coaching staff thinks the tier break is between Zach Moss and Deion Jackson. Literally did not have another running back take a single snap in this game. It's Zach Moss season. Might not be as efficient as we saw in week 2. Average 4.9 yards per attempt. Saw some work as a receiver, which you love to see. Again, might not be as efficient against the Ravens, but in terms of a volume-based play, like I think you're looking at an RB2, at any given point until we see the return, if we do see the return of Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah. And who needs Jonathan Taylor at this point? Because Zach Moss has been dominant in the one game that we saw him. So I like him this week as well. I think, if you're dealing with injuries at the running back position, Zach Moss can absolutely be somebody that you plug into your lineup and feel comfortable about, even though it, like you said, not the best matchup, but the volume again is there. And that's what we care about more than anything. So hopefully that leads to more fantasy production. Looking at the Ravens here, Odell Beckham is questionable with an ankle injury. It's super annoying that when I search for Odell Beckham, the first thing that comes up is that he's maybe dating Kim Kardashian.
I know. Come on.
Like, why would I care about that over his ankle, internet? Come on. But anyways, if Odell Beckham is out, we could see a potentially larger role for Rashad Bateman. But more importantly, the very legit Zay Flowers is also should be heavily involved this week, tied with Mark Andrews for the team lead in target rate so far, minimum 25 routes at 24.2%. And this is like the matchup to get those wide receivers out there again against the Colts secondary.
Yeah, you love this matchup against the Colts secondary. I think this is one of my favorite plays of the week. I believe I have Zay Flowers as my wide receiver 20 on the week. Would not be surprised at all if he outperformed that at this point. He is, I think, going to function as this team's wide receiver 1, and did see a little bit of that dip in target share with the return of Mark Andrews. But again, you have the injury to Odell Beckham Jr. I think this is a great spot for Zay Flowers, who's to this point looked absolutely incredible and very dynamic in this offense. I think this is, if free for all, this is the matchup that you're targeting for your wide receivers all year long. Lamar Jackson, my QB1 on the week. I am all in on this Baltimore Ravens offense. Interestingly, Justice Hill went down with is down with an injury, which puts Gus Edwards kind of in an interesting spot as a potential flex play if he's still available on your waiver wire. There's a toe injury, so don't love the. I never like a toe injury. I never like a toe injury because that just limits the all of that burst. And Gus Edwards is a guy that we've seen this Ravens offense go to time and time again. And guess what? He performs. He does it.
Yep. Yeah, he did it last week, right? He punched in a touchdown as well. And I know the team signed Kenyon Drake too. So if Justice Hill is out, I'm sure they'll find a way to maybe get Kenyon Drake involved or whatever. But yeah, I'm not too concerned about it. I don't mind Gus Edwards as a play if Justice Hill is out as well. So anything else from this game really that stands out to you? I do like the Lamar Jackson QB1 call as well. It's nice.
Might be a little spicy. I think Anthony Richardson, obviously, like you mentioned, in the concussion protocol, if he plays, you play Anthony Richardson. Yeah. In case that needs to be said. But yeah, I think we kind of know what to expect from this matchup in general.
Nice. All right, let's go to the Denver Broncos at the Miami Dolphins. What do you like about this one? It's a decent matchup for Javonte Williams against Miami. So how you feeling about that Broncos backfield after 2 weeks? Because it has been a bit of a split there for overall snaps.
It's been a bit of a split. I didn't like the matchup this week. I do like it a bit more against this Miami Dolphins team. And, I still think that, even though I don't think this passing offense is as big a disaster as we saw in 2022, there's still some issues here that they need to work out. And what better way to work through some of those issues or crutch yourself as you work through some of these issues than by feeding into the run game. And, again, did not like the matchup last week. I kind of projected Javonte Williams to have a down week, and he did. But I think this could be an interesting spot, for him to have a nice bounce back game. I don't mind this matchup at all. And, maybe, we'll get another couple of deep bombs down the field, and maybe we'll get some PI calls. Who knows? But this is, I think, a good spot for Javonte Williams. Played 45% of offensive snaps in each of the last 2 weeks. Had 14 touches last week, even though it was again a sort of a down matchup. I don't mind Javonte Williams this week. And I think we're probably still in that sort of like warm up phase for Javonte Williams as he continues to get comfortable and really starts to trust that knee and the ability to sustain volume under that knee. That's kind of where I'm at. I'm feeling okay. But yeah, the Samaje Perine, kind of an interesting wrinkle. And, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. He's had 4 targets in each of the last 2 weeks, like not overly involved as a runner, just 9 rush attempts in that span, but has played, a fair chunk of the snaps, 50% of offensive snaps last week. Any sort of thoughts on, are we going to continue to see this shift towards Javonte Williams, or are you worried that this is actually going to be a season-long split kind of right down the middle?
I don't think it'll be a season-long split. I do believe that Javonte Williams eventually emerges there as kind of the clear back. And we kind of saw it a little bit last week where he dominated the carries at least, right? 12-1 over Perine, which I think was a really great sign. Even though Perine still handled the majority of the passing down work, I think there's enough there for Williams and that he's playing enough snaps that he should still like sporadically get targets throughout a game. It just might not be as consistent, I guess, as Perine right now. But I'm with you. I love the matchup. I think Williams obviously has the talent. Miami's allowed the 5th most rushing yards so far this year, 2nd most rushing yards before contact, 6th most rushing yards after contact, and they've tied for the 3rd most rushing touchdowns allowed this season. So all of those things point towards Javonte Williams more than Samaje Perine for this week. I know Williams, he still has the lone carry in goal to go situations this year as well, even though Perine is getting more snaps there. They've all been passing downs. So want to see them run the ball there more often. And if that means more work for Williams near the goal line as well, that's just another positive for him. But yeah, I got to believe that Javonte Williams eventually starts to get more involved in the passing down work as he gets healthier or as they feel more comfortable with him coming off that injury too. So I do like Javonte Williams this week and like him a lot for the rest of the season too.
I like it. This might be a good like trade window. If you do also like Javonte Williams and, you believe this offense can, continue with some of that offensive production. Javonte Williams, if, one of your league mates is concerned about the usage through 2 games this far, this could be your opportunity to pounce.
Yeah, I like that. And look, it's a great matchup for the run game, not ideal for the Denver passing offense though. So Miami does rank 7th in coverage grade so far this year. I know we love Marvin Mims overall, but I think it's important to keep in mind he only ran 6 routes in week 2 to post that wide receiver 17 finish. So not trustworthy usage at all there for those that did pick him up off waiver wires and are tempted to start him, hoping for another one of those big 100+ yard games. It's a little bit hard to bank on that, especially on 6 routes. So hopefully the usage increases, but it's only hope at this point. I don't think we're putting him in starting lineups.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
Yeah. And then the other thing with Miami's offense too, because this is pretty much a straightforward offense as well, but the only other thing that stands out is Jalen Waddle is in concussion protocol. He wasn't participating in practice today, but he was seen stretching on the field. So progressing, I guess, but there's still no real sign that he's gonna play or not. So is there another wide receiver on this team other than Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle that you would be interested in for this passing offense? River Craycraft or Braxton Berrios, any of those guys?
Nah.
Okay.
Nah.
Yeah, it's
nah.
It's hard. It's hard to trust these guys, and they're not going to step into the Jalen Waddle role either, right? Even though there's, I think, volume in this Miami passing offense, it's not, I don't think, consistent enough snaps for either one of those guys to be playing them outside of like the deepest of leagues, really.
Yeah, I totally agree.
All right, let's go on to a ad here from our friends at DraftKings. We're back with another week of football with DraftKings Sportsbook is helping us in on the NFL action with great offers every single game day. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Throw five down on any of this week's epic matchups to walk away an instant winner. And DraftKings isn't stopping there. All customers can take advantage of two new offers every game day this September. Football's more fun when you're in on the action. So download the app now and sign up with the code PFF. New customers can bet just $5 to get $200 instantly in bonus bets only on DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL with code PFF. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort. Licensed partner Golden Nugget Lake Charles. 21 plus, age varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. See DraftKings.com/football terms for eligibility terms and responsible gaming resources. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. Eligibility and deposit restrictions apply. All right. Let's go to the Tennessee Titans against the Cleveland Browns. The Titans' offensive line has allowed a pretty decent pressure rate so far this year, 32%, which ranks as the eighth highest in the league. They've also allowed the second highest knockdown rate at 14.5%. So that's basically sacks and QB hits allowed per pass rush snap faced. And they're facing off against a Browns defensive line that has earned the third highest pass rush grade so far this season. They've generated a pressure in fewer than 2.5 seconds on 34.8% of their pass rush snaps, which is also the third best mark in the league. Ryan Tannehill has thrown 2 interceptions, 2 turnover-worthy plays with no touchdowns or big-time throws when pressured this season. As a result, Tannehill has thrown for just 81 passing yards on those pressured dropbacks, which accounts for only 18% of his total passing yards this season. DeAndre Hopkins also felt the effects of this. He's only caught 4 passes for 44 yards on pressure dropbacks. No other Titans receiver has more than 1 reception or 20 receiving yards on pressure dropbacks this season. Kate, with all of that said, do you trust the Titans passing offense this week?
No, thank you. I appreciate you asking, but I want nothing to do with anybody on either side of this ball, to be totally honest. Have Derrick Henry, even, who, like, obviously you don't sit Derrick Henry if he is playing, but dealing with a toe injury for the second straight day. He did not practice. So according to Teron Davenport, no sign of DeAndre Hopkins, no sign of Derrick Henry, no sign of Peter Skoronski. Like, this is just Titans are a disaster. I'm not trusting a single player, I think, in my fantasy lineups, just given this matchup. Going to be, I think, a really, really ugly game. Derrick Henry, obviously we don't know his status at the time we're recording this, but if he's not a go, guess what? I'm not starting Tajay Spears. I think this is kind of one of these moments where we're going to try to set up for success, as a potential volume play. But I think, Tajay Spears could be a trap play come Sunday. And you know what? Like, outside of maybe Amari Cooper, I don't really want to start any of the Browns either. Like, Jerome Ford, kind of seemed to be stepping up into this RB1 role. Then they signed Kareem Hunt, who is obviously very familiar with the offense, very familiar with the team. Who knows, like, what kind of football shape he is in, how many snaps he's going to be able to take in week 1. So, like, I still think Jerome Ford's probably going to lead the team in carries this week. But against this Tennessee Titans defense, which I keep saying, John, I'm not playing anybody if I can help it against this Titans defense, allowing just 2.6 yards per attempt to opposing running backs so far this season. And their success, against the running back dates back to last year. Like, this is not a good matchup. The Tennessee Titans, their best point of attack is in the secondary, allowed, in week 1 and week 2, 2 different receivers, at least 80 or more receiving yards. Could be an interesting spot for Amari Cooper, but it's even hard to trust Deshaun Watson in this offense that hasn't really looked competent in the first 2 weeks of the season. Despite the fact that they're 1-1, I feel like you wouldn't have guessed it if you just watched them play offense through those 2 games. This has been, a season for the defense for the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, their defense is legit, and they're absolutely the bright spot of this team because Deshaun Watson has been incredibly disappointing so far, I would say anyways. I mean, another good tweet here, another Steve Palazzolo banger. PFF grade for Deshaun Watson. So this is all numbers with him with the Browns. 57.5 PFF grade, which is 35th out of 40 qualifying quarterbacks. 54.9 passing grade, which is 36th. His big time throw rate sits at just 2.1%, which is 32nd. Turnover worthy play rate 3.6%, which is the 11th highest. And his sack percentage at 9.7% is the third highest. So everything about Deshaun Watson has been not good, and it hasn't looked great this season. It didn't look great last season. There's been really no signs of like significant improvement, which I think a lot of people were banking on heading into this year, that he would get back to form. We just haven't seen it yet. So it's really hard to trust this Browns offense.
Yeah, no, thank you. I again, like that one point of attack, I think could be through the air, but that's also kind of banking on Deshaun Watson overcoming all of those stats that you just mentioned and having sort of a miracle bounce back. They just seem so out of rhythm, so out of sync. Yeah. I'm not a fan there. Not a fan of taking the risk there when I don't think the upsides, all that high for these assets, maybe outside of Amari Cooper.
Right. Yeah. I think Amari Cooper is kind of the main one. I liked Elijah Moore coming into the year, but I just haven't been overly excited about him so far. So yeah, there's maybe opportunity there for Jerome Ford this week, but again, it's just the Titans defense is just going to make things difficult. So probably more like low end RB2 at best for Jerome Ford. So let's go to the Buffalo Bills and the Washington Commanders. I just got the notification James Cook is now questionable. I don't know what's going on there, but a bit of a bummer to see considering that he dominated the snaps last week outside of goal-to-go situations. But this was one of the reasons we didn't love Javonte Williams last week facing this Washington defensive line. They are very good. The good thing, I guess, they do play with like a fairly light box typically, so could potentially be some room there for Cook if he can get to the second level. But the Bills, their offensive line too, they've been 12th in run blocking grade, which isn't bad. So how are you feeling about James Cook heading into this week, assuming he plays, assuming the questionable thing is nothing? But I haven't looked too much into it because I just saw it.
I'm not again, kind of a surprise to me, as you mentioned. Haven't looked into this yet, but already wasn't super high in this matchup. You love what you saw in week 2. And I think you especially loved most of the usage. Led the team with 18 carries, 125 rushing yards, 6.9 yards per attempt, 28% missed forced tackle rate, 4.7 yards after contact per attempt. Like, that is good. That is hashtag good. And the biggest point of contention there again is that lack of red zone usage. Both Murray and Harris combined for 8 attempts in the red zone. Cook only saw 2. Cook didn't even see a carry inside the 5. All of those went to Murray and Harris. Like, that's a red flag here. But in general, I think this is going to be, a very defensive matchup. The Bills defense looks great. The Commanders defense looks great. And I think that might be where we see a little bit of a power struggle here. And in order for Cook to sort of produce, regardless of health, he's going to need to break off some of those runs, and you're going to need to bank on that. But I don't want to bank on them against the Commanders.
Right. Yeah, that's it makes it a little bit harder for this matchup. And yeah, I just tried to look it up. It just says undisclosed. So we have no idea why James Cook has missed practice today. But hopefully it's nothing and he gets back. But yeah, it's still not the best matchup. And even for the receivers, I mean, obviously Stephon Diggs, you're not worried about Stephon Diggs really, but The Commanders, they've been a top 10 team in deploying man coverage this year. So far, Gabe Davis has seen a hit to his target rate when he's playing against man, just 10.3% target rate versus 16% in zone. So I did like him a lot last week. It worked out. Not as into him this week. I think I'd look elsewhere for a potential streamer at wide receiver. So how do you feel about the passing offense for Buffalo for this one?
Not overly excited. I mean, you
Yeah.
start your Stephon Diggs, and that's kind of where it ends for me. I'm not seeking out any matchups against the Commanders unless I'm out of options.
Yeah, fair enough. But speaking more of the Commanders, Sam Howell, no big deal, just QB10, y'all. Still hasn't even really fully unlocked that rushing potential, which I think is coming maybe this week. But again, Sam Howell just continues to do it. I love to see it from him. I know, the offensive weapons, Jahan Dotson, Terry McLaurin, they've been fine. They haven't really had like the huge games. He's just been doing it with everybody, which is great. He's got the weapons to spread the ball around and build up his own fantasy production, which is nice. So even against the Bills, I don't mind Sam Howell. I just kind of continue to plug and play him in like super flex leagues as my QB2 quite often.
It's kind of crazy because you look at the production between Josh Allen and Sam Howell, and actually it's not all that different.
Right.
Like Josh Allen, 510 passing yards on the season, Sam Howell, 501. Sam Howell, 3 passing touchdowns, 1 interception. Josh Allen, 4 passing touchdowns, 3 interceptions. You see Sam Howell with a little bit more efficiency in terms of his yards per attempt. Uh, they're actually kind of comparable right now at this point in the season, which is insane. I agree. You'd love to see a little bit more of that rushing potential with Sam Howell. It's there. Just need to kind of exercise that a little bit more frequently. Yeah, he's just kind of getting it done, and he's not hyper targeting necessarily anyone player. You just like to see that he is sort of making his progressions in the field. And, I love Sam Howell. Again, you don't love this matchup against the Bills necessarily, but, probably going to be under pressure, probably going to see, some tough defensive looks that maybe he hasn't seen before. But, I think the rushing potential, if they are able to, tighten up coverage down the field, you might see Sam Howell still be able to use his legs and get some plays that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I like it. The only other thing, I guess, for the Commanders, the backfield, we know Brian Robinson dominated the touches. Antonio Gibson has essentially been a ghost so far. So are you ready to move on from Antonio Gibson, or are you holding out hope at all for him in this offense?
I'm not comfortable starting him in any format whatsoever at this point. I was really excited about Antonio Gibson. I thought he was in kind of an interesting spot to make a couple waves as a pass catcher. Just 4 targets so far in the season, 54 receiving yards, but it doesn't even have sort of that floor as 5-10 carries. Like that's what you want to see on any given week to supplement some of that upside as a receiver, if that's sort of what you're banking on there, and you haven't seen that floor for carries. This has been the Brian Robinson show, and I hate to say it, but Antonio Gibson, unless you're in dire straits at running back, probably droppable at this point.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think this is probably last chance to kind of see what the
To your
usage is there for Antonio Gibson, and then yeah, we can chuck him to the side and hopefully find a better option, because if the usage continues the way it does, it's just not usable for fantasy purposes. I think that's pretty much it for the Washington Howells game. Anything else for you?
I think that's it. Mr. Howell,
Yeah.
we salute you. I love me some Sam Howell, baby. I'm excited. And you know what? I think this is going to be sort of a statement game for Sam Howell if he can produce, even, finish inside the top 15 fantasy quarterbacks. I feel like that's a really good indication against, if he can pull it off against this defense, then I'm just comfortable starting Sam Howell, regardless of matchup. Like I think this is going to be the big test for him this year. And he's got a lot to prove, but he's one of those guys that he might still be under waiver wire at this point. And very much worth a stash, because if he can overcome this matchup, and maybe show off some of that athleticism, some of that power with his legs, you might have a fantasy stud rest of season, and he might still be under waiver wire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I think when we did the waiver wire episode on Tuesday, he was at like less than 10% rostered on ESPN League. So he's definitely out there, even still. So to go get some Sam Howell. And yeah, I still like the potential for him this week.
Sam Howell.
All right, let's go to the Carolina Panthers and the Seattle Seahawks. It seems like Bryce Young is unlikely to play in this game, which means we're more than likely going to get Andy Dalton. Do you have any interest in the Carolina Panthers receiving weapons with Andy Dalton at QB?
No. I'm just not a big fan of this matchup in general. Like it's on the road. I don't know. I don't really like any of these Carolina wide receivers in general. The transition to Andy Dalton, maybe that increased some of this offensive efficiency a little bit. Playing with a rookie quarterback, not always, ideal in any circumstances, but I don't know that any of these guys are big standouts to me at this point. We've seen Hayden Hurst have some success. He might be an okay option if you're looking to stream a tight end, but again, not somebody I'm necessarily excited about at this point. Just kind of looking to avoid this offense in general. Again, unless I'm in some dire straits where you really need to be skimming the waiver wire here.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Even with Bryce Young at quarterback, I still wasn't overly interested in these guys after 2 weeks, but it's nothing to get excited about here in Carolina. So we could probably talk about the Seattle Seahawks. I mean, for me, I don't know. Again, it's a team that we mostly know what's going on with them as far as their offense goes. Carolina, I will say, like the seventh highest rate of zone coverage in the league, so very zone heavy. And Tyler Lockett has stood out to me as somebody particularly impressive against zone coverage so far this season. He's earned 0.49 fantasy points per route run, which leads his team. It's a top 25 mark in the league. So I think he could potentially be a nice play this week against Carolina. But other than that, I mean, we know we're starting DK Metcalf for the most part. How do you feel about the backfield for Seattle?
I kind of like it.
Yeah.
I think this is an interesting matchup, kind of fading DK Metcalf this week. And you also mentioned Tyler Lockett. I like him a little bit more in this matchup than DK Metcalf in particular. Interestingly, like DK Metcalf has been the wide receiver that's been actually producing. But, Tyler Lockett's usage is absolutely there. He's seeing, he's leading the team in terms of red zone targets, end zone targets. It just hasn't necessarily connected. So I think he's a little bit overdue for a solid matchup. And I think this one plays a little bit more toward Tyler Lockett than it does DK Metcalf. So kind of looking at that split there. But I think part of what we're seeing right now with the Carolina Panthers is that there's been a lot of productivity in terms of the run game. Tyler Algier, 75 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns. Bijan Robinson, 56 rushing yards, second most fantasy points given up to the position so far. And I think, some of that probably comes from, the fact that this isn't a robust Carolina Panthers offense, right? Like, this is not a situation where you're playing, opposing teams are playing from behind a lot. Like, they're able to run the ball and have, some of that time of possession and enjoy that. I very much like the run game, not enough to try to take a shot yet on Zach Charbonnet. Again, I love Zach Charbonnet, but I think this is going to be a big Kenneth Walker game. And I think, pretty sure I have him right now at like RB6, RB7. So nice. Very, very bullish. I think this is going to be an opportunity, not just for volume. I think this is also going to be a spot where you could see some efficiency.
Nice. Love that. All right, let's go to the Chicago Bears at the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, the struggles of Justin Fields have really been disappointing. And it doesn't really get easier this week either. I was super confident in him heading into the year, but watching him early on does have me pretty concerned, more so than I thought I would be 2 weeks into the season. So not feeling great about Justin Fields, not feeling great about DJ Moore. Obviously, nobody else on the Chicago passing game is sniffing a starting lineup for me. How about you? Do you have any reason for optimism that things will turn around for Justin Fields in this offense? Make me feel better.
I think your biggest hope is that, the team is going to realize that they're forcing Justin Fields to be something he's not. He's not, I don't know if he ever can become a pocket passer. He's not one right now, and trying to force him to be one, not successful whatsoever right now for a team that was so heavy against the run so heavy with the run last year. We're just not seeing enough emphasis on that as a part of Justin Fields' game. And I think taking away that aspect of his game probably hurts him more as a passer, because you're just limiting him so significantly in what he brings to the table. He just looked like a glorified disaster. 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, like really hard to even trust him in fantasy at this point. But I'm not dropping him yet. I'm not getting crazy. I'm still holding out some hope. But if there is hope, it's got to come from the coaching staff and a willingness to get more design runs in play and start utilizing his best skill set. And what makes him so special as a quarterback is that dual threat nature. Like, you've got to emphasize that. And, it's sometimes you look at the offensive game plans for these teams and you're like, why are you overthinking it? Stop overthinking it and do the thing you're good at.
Yeah.
I'm ready to take over as OC for the Bears. Do the thing you're good at.
You're hired. Run the ball. You're absolutely hired, because somebody has to go in there and give those guys head a shake, because it's true. It's super frustrating to watch. It's puzzling, to say the least. I mean, I don't know what the game plan is going to be this week against the Chiefs, but
it doesn't feel like they have one. It doesn't feel like this team has an identity at all right now, which is part of the big concern. Now, the one good thing for fantasy managers we saw last week, finally, Deontay Foreman was a healthy scratch. So we moved one guy out of the equation, which was good. Neither of them, Khalil Herbert or rookie Roschon Johnson were overly productive as rushers, but you like at least that backfield's simplifying and clearing out a little bit. But again, they, in order for them to actually succeed, like these 2 running backs last week combined for 11 carries. Like, that is not the identity of the Chicago Bears coming into the season. Was supposed to be centered around the run game, and it's literally been complete opposite of that. I don't know if they feel like they can't establish the run because of struggles on defense, which haven't been helped by injuries. They, their defensive coordinator resigned. Like, this team's a disaster. And congratulations for having the number 1 overall pick again.
Yeah, basically. That'll make
Caleb Williams season
for sure. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting, because they are not off to a good start. And at least with the backfield, some addition by subtraction there by giving us just Roschon Johnson and Khalil Herbert. We'll see if that clears itself up anymore this week. But just avoiding avoiding the Bears against a very good Chiefs defense. How about on the Chiefs side? This feels like the same thing that we talk about every week with the Chiefs. Is their wide receiver core, right? Like, the targets are there for Kadarius Toney, the snaps are not. There's somebody else leading the group this week. Sky Moore led them last week, but it's just such a heavy rotation. We know Travis Kelce, we know Patrick Mahomes are not leaving our lineups, but it's still zero interest in the Chiefs wide receiver core, or has somebody emerged?
Still no interest for me. I know, like you mentioned, Kadarius Toney being targeted on a high percentage of snaps, but not playing a ton of snaps. And, these targets that he's had haven't really resulted to much. So, despite literally leading the team in targets right now, ranks 5th on the team in total receiving yards. Not great, Bob. Not great. Don't love that. you know, I do think that this matchup is fairly advantageous. Love, the opportunity that, this offense in general could have in terms of getting, some of that pass game going. I think this could be a really nice spot against this banged up secondary that has lost all direction. I think for season long leagues, I have, a harder time justifying these guys in your lineup. But, Sky Moore, probably the best bet for you. But, gut check, I'm going with Rashee Rice again. I just got the tinglies for Rashee Rice. Leads the team in PFF receiving grade, leads the team in passer rating when targeted, leads the team in yards per route run. He's played, few snaps, but he's been extremely, extremely efficient in those few snaps. And I think that this is going to translate to increased playing time sooner rather than later. And I'll take this matchup against the Bears as an ideal opportunity to spark plug that offense.
Nice. Yeah, it's a great matchup for sure. It's just a matter of trusting, the playing time for these guys. And Rashee Rice, yeah, I think his playing time even dipped last week, which is crazy. You would hope that it just continues to increase as the weeks go on, but we'll see what happens. I like Rashee Rice, like long term. I don't know. I feel like I just don't want to trust it. I don't want to play around with the Chiefs wide receivers at this point. Yeah.
You're playing roulette. If you start a Chiefs receiver, you're playing roulette. Again, saw a dip in productivity last week in week 2 for Rashee Rice, decreased playing time. But, again, they went back to the well with Kadarius Toney. And I think the lack of production, despite their continued efforts with Kadarius Toney, needs to be a clear signal that, like, let's try something else. And let's see if somebody else can get the ball rolling here. Again, Rashee Rice is just my favorite, but none of these guys I'm excited about in terms of fantasy upside, even if this is a great matchup. Maybe take a couple of darts in your DFS lineups, but season long, this is really, really hard to trust anybody in this receiving core.
Yeah. Just hoping that the Chiefs find this as like a positive matchup to test these guys out a little bit more, like Rashee Rice, because I mean, the Chiefs aren't losing this game against the Bears, right? It just does not seem possible at this point. And who knows? We've obviously been shocked in the NFL before. And now that I've said that, you might want to bet heavily on the Bears, but we'll see. Let's just keep it going here. We're going to go to the Dallas Cowboys and the Arizona Cardinals. Shocker, I'm staying away from the Arizona wide receivers. Dallas, yeah, they've been unreal, this defense. Super man-heavy defense as well, the most man-heavy defense in the NFL. And against man, the Cardinals wide receivers have totaled 3 receptions for just over 30 yards. The Cowboys are a top 10 team in coverage grade while in man coverage. They've allowed a first down or a touchdown on just 28.6% of their coverage snaps in man, which is tied for 6th best in the league. You add in that elite pass rush from the Dallas defensive line, and this is just a offense to avoid completely in Arizona, I think.
Yeah, no, thank you. James Conner, a guy who I've really liked a lot. Like even him, I think he's a fine, maybe volume-based play. Might get some work as a receiver because I do think they're going to struggle to get that efficient run game going against the Dallas Cowboys. But in general, you're not looking forward to starting any of these guys outside of sort of desperation plays. Dallas Cowboys ranked 2nd in overall pressure rate, 4th fewest missed forced tackles. Like, they're getting to the quarterback. They're limiting plays based on their tackling ability. This is just not a defensive matchup that you're looking to target in any way. On the other side of the ball, though, like, start up all your Cowboys. Why not?
Yeah, I am. That it feels like a good enough matchup to definitely feel comfortable playing any of the Dallas players, even Dak Prescott, and if Brandon Cooks plays, I can't remember if he's looking to play this week or not, but I'd feel perfectly fine about him. Tony Pollard, I think, again inside that top 5 running back for this week as well against Arizona. The one, I guess, Jake Ferguson has looked good so far this year, but below 50% route participation last week was pretty disappointing. So that could be a little harder to bank on, at least from the tight end position. So that's maybe the one position I'd be looking to maybe find somebody else in this spot, at least until we see that usage go up for Ferguson. But how about you?
Yeah, we did see, a little bit of involvement there from Luke Schoonmaker, rookie
Mhm.
tight end for the Dallas Cowboys last week. He caught a touchdown. You did get a touchdown from Jake Ferguson, which you love to
Yeah.
see, but just in general, Ferguson's leading the team in terms of routes run for the tight end group. Um, but yeah, it's probably um, not the most ideal situation, but
Mhm.
I also think you could do a lot worse
Right.
than Jake Ferguson.
Fair. Yeah. There we go. So yeah, not a lot to really have to kind of focus on in that game. It's pretty straightforward. So let's go to Sunday Night Football. The Pittsburgh Steelers at the Las Vegas Raiders. Najee Harris versus Jalen Warren. This has been a continued saga throughout the off season. It's continued into the regular season here. How you feeling about Najee Warren Volume 3, I guess, now of us talking about this, previewing the weeks?
Yeah, again, just in general, you don't want really any asset in this offense. Jalen Warren, I think, kind of his most interesting point here. Like, saw them, move back toward the run last week after 10 total rush attempts in week one, the Pittsburgh
Mm-hmm.
Steelers. You're still seeing, involvement from Najee Harris as the team's primary running back. But what's really interesting for Jalen Warren is his usage as a receiver. 11 targets so far through 2 games, caught 9 of them for 78 yards, looks super explosive as a receiver. I think he's one of these guys that maybe even if you're not throwing him into your fantasy lineups, maybe you're smashing that over in terms of his receiving yards. I think he's like right around 31 receiving yards or something on DraftKings right
Okay.
now. One of those guys that like I kind of I like for that potential as for work as a receiver. But in general, I don't want any assets on this offense. Pat Fryermuth, absolutely unstartable. He is droppable at this point for me, given the struggles on the offense. 5 total targets despite ranking top 10 in total pass attempts. You hate to see it. You hate to see all of that. Have seen some difference in usage. So he's seeing a higher percentage of his snaps playing inline as opposed to playing out of the slot. Have seen Allen Robinson playing, the bulk of those snaps from the slot. I don't know if that has anything to do with his usage, but in general, like this offense looks lost. Kenny Pickett looks lost, and this team has a propensity for targeting outside the numbers. And when you have Pat Fryermuth running routes across the middle of the field, that you know that's not conducive for a big enough target share in order to be startable for fantasy.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I feel like I could trust George Pickens this week. I think it's a good matchup for him, but I'm with you. I don't trust Pat Fryermuth. I don't really feel great about Allen Robinson either. I don't mind Najee Harris this week. Like it's such a weird matchup because the Steelers, their offensive line is generating exactly 0 yards before contact so far this season, which for anyone wondering, that is last in the league. But meanwhile, the Raiders, they rank 30th in run defense grade this season, so not good. So something kind of has to give here, right? It's essentially like the opposite of the unstoppable force meets the immovable
It's
object, whatever that is, like wet toilet paper versus a cooked spaghetti noodle, or I have no idea, but whatever it is that we're getting for Najee Harris here, it has to be better for him, right?
it's whoever like sucks worse at this
Yeah,
point.
yeah,
It's the battle of mid right
it
now
is.
between the Steelers offensive line and the Raiders defensive line. I think yeah, I agree. I think George Pickens is a fine play. Kind of emerging as that top target without
Mhm.
Deontay Johnson. I hate giving any advice about Najee Harris at this point because I'm so worried that like I'm totally biased. I actually think from a perspective of watching Harris as compared to last year and the year prior, I actually think he looks better. I think he looks more explosive. I think his vision looks improved from previous seasons, which I think was kind of a point of contention for me when it comes to Najee Harris and his production. Like it just felt like he could not see the holes. I feel like all of those things have improved this season, but it's really hard because, you have Matt Canada, who I think, from, an offensive play caller standpoint, I don't think he understands like Najee bruiser. Jalen Warren, guy you can bounce to the outside. Like he thinks you can do anything with either one of these backs rather than, developing a game plan that's suitable to their skill sets and a game plan that de-emphasizes, is that like a word? De-emphasizes the failures on the offensive line. Like he's not a good enough offensive coordinator to do that. So I think you're not expecting a ton from Najee Harris, but like technically it should be a fine game against the Raiders. They are road underdogs, 2.5-point underdogs. But historically the Steelers haven't traveled super well out west. We'll see if that changes. How about the Raiders though? Like anybody you're interested in against this Pittsburgh Steelers defense? Because Jimmy Garoppolo might get eaten alive today or on Sunday. Sure. I don't like TJ Watt, and they're going to make a TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith sandwich with Jimmy Garoppolo. It's going to be, it's going to be brutal.
I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, this is it's not a great matchup for the Raiders offense, and Devontae Adams also questionable. Jacoby Myers still dealing with concussion, I believe. So both of these guys, if they're not playing, I have zero interest in anybody who is a passing option on the Raiders. Josh Jacobs is probably the one where I'm like, I think I still just keep rolling him out there because the volume is there, right? Look, I know the stat line last week. Everybody saw it. It's very funny. Negative yards, blah, blah, blah. But the usage is there, right? Like, and I get that the Steelers defense is there. I just don't believe that him or the Raiders run game is that bad so far. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. How do you feel about Jacobs and the Raiders right now?
I don't mind him. He's averaging 1.6 yards per carry. You don't love that, but it's got to go up from here, right? And I think what probably encourages me more is like last week in week 2 when they were having trouble running the ball, 9 carries, -2 rushing yards. They, got him involved as a receiver and you kind of like that pivot, 20 touches in week 1, fewer touches, 14 touches in week 2, but you're starting a running back with 14 plus touches every week. And Cam Hayward, out with a groin injury. I think that definitely is a weak spot for the Steelers defense. There's plenty of playmakers, but I like the Steelers better for their pass rush and less so for their run defense. And, I think, the Steelers, they always have a propensity for missed tackles, and that could complement, the Raiders and the run game here pretty well. They're at home. Like I really like Jacobs this week, as much as it pains me as a Steelers fan to say.
Yeah, it's hard to bench him, right? Like, that the volume is there both as a runner and as a receiver. So it's just like, I think you put him in, you hold your nose and hope that it ends up better than it was last week. But like you said, at the very least, he should still be involved in the receiving game, which will help him rack up some more fantasy production that way, at least. So, all right, let's go on to one of 2 Monday Night Football games once again, because it's week 3, so naturally there's 2 Monday Night Football games again. The Philadelphia Eagles at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is the first one. Any confidence in an AJ Brown blow-up game for the first time this season? Because we have not seen it yet from AJ Brown.
Yes, AJ Brown going kaboom.
Nice.
I'm all over AJ Brown in week 3. The Buccaneers, their run defense, I'm not targeting matchups against. Their pass defense, though, like they're banged up. You got Avonte Maddox just placed on IR. James Bradbury, I'm not sure what his status is heading into week 3, but managing a concussion. I think this has been a point of liability here for this Eagles defense is the secondary. You have AJ Brown, who, has kind of taken a back seat recently to Devonta Smith, it would feel like, but ranks 7th among wide receivers in targeted air yard percentage, ahead of Devonta Smith, has had 4 red zone targets, 2 end zone targets. Like the usage is there. If you build it, he will catch it and it will go for a touchdown. And I'm 100% going back to the well, especially against this matchup through the air.
Love that. Yeah, I'm with you. I am very much hoping for the big game for AJ Brown as well. What about anything else for the Eagles offense? Again, pretty straightforward offense for the most part. We know what they are. But the backfield has gotten a little bit more interesting with DeAndre Swift's emergence last week on Thursday Night Football, had the big game against Minnesota. Kenneth Gainwell potentially comes back. Do you think that mixes up anything at all, or are we still trusting DeAndre Swift?
I'm trusting DeAndre Swift. I'm not comfortable starting Kenneth Gainwell at this point. I feel like it's going to be really hard to put that lightning back in the bottle. And maybe they do. They came out and, it seemed like Kenneth Gainwell had this very firm grasp on that role, injury aside. So maybe he gets more involved than you would expect, but I still think this is probably DeAndre Swift's role. I think honestly, probably the biggest question mark for me is what to do with Dallas Goedert, who we all probably drafted as like the tight end 6, tight end 7, somewhere around there, ranks tied for the 10th most routes run, only produced 22 total yards, 6 receptions, like been super inefficient, but hasn't been playable to this point. Does he see some positive regression here? Because like historically, he's been an analytics dream. This year, not so much.
Yeah, it's not the best matchup either for tight ends, right? Unless he's getting Devin White covering him, which is unlikely considering they also have Levante David, they have Antoine Winfield, they have Ryan Neal, guys that can cover the tight end very well. So look, they tried to scheme up touches for him a little bit on Thursday night last week, and he just wasn't able to do much with it. And then after that, they just kind of went away from him a little bit. So not feeling very confident. I liked Dallas Goedert quite a bit this year. So far, not off to a great start, but God, I think there'll be better matchups for him. I just don't love it maybe necessarily this week against Tampa Bay.
Yeah, I like the idea of Jalen Hurts and this offense targeting, the outside, not so much right across that linebacker core with this tight end. And not giving up faith on Goddard. You love to see the route participation, even if the target share and the efficiency hasn't been significant. So not dropping him at this point. Like you said, better matchups ahead, but I do think that, I don't think you can start him like at this point. If I have been counting on Dallas Goedert and I see Taysom Hill on waivers, I'm probably picking up Taysom Hill in week 2 and I'm playing him over Dallas Goedert. Like that's how lukewarm I am on Dallas Goedert this week. And I'm not happy about it.
Yeah, it's hard to blame you. It's been a very rough start for the year. So we'll see what happens this week. Again, don't love the matchup, but I do have at least more confidence long term for Dallas Goedert in this offense. We'll see what there'll be more favorable matchups basically going forward. But on the Tampa Bay side, we talked about Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans last week. Mike Evans had a massive game, so we love to see that. But he's really been, I think, another top target, I think, this year. I mean, he's playing against the Eagles here. The Eagles have been a top 10 team with in zone coverage, but they've also been in the bottom 10 teams in yards allowed per coverage snap while in zone. So I think there's opportunity here for Mike Evans to dominate the zone coverage like he has all year. He's been among the best in the league in fantasy points per route run facing zone coverage, 0.79. He's earned the 3rd best receiving grade versus zone coverage so far this season as well. So I think this is a really great matchup to kind of go back to Mike Evans as another potentially huge game against Philadelphia. Even though the Eagles defense is great, I think Evans could be the kind of one that stands out, at least to me, that I'm most interested in anyways. But how about you? Anybody that you like on Tampa Bay here?
I actually, the Baker Mayfield, Mike Evans stack might not be the worst. I mentioned those few injuries to the Eagles secondary. That could be a really nice spot for Mayfield to take advantage. He's been, slinging it down the field. 81 PFF passing grade, ranks 3rd best among all quarterbacks. 6 most completions of 20 or more air yards this year, like showing a great connection with Mike Evans. I think it's a fine start for Mike Evans. Probably going to finish as another top 12 week, especially given the injuries here in this Eagles secondary. Also, spoiler alert, talked about Baker Mayfield in my emergency waiver wire article coming out on Friday. So maybe if you need a quarterback in case of emergency, I don't think Baker Mayfield is the worst option, which is insane for me to say.
Yeah, yeah. I think, look, he's played better than Deshaun Watson this
Yes,
year,
he
and I'm sorry,
has.
Browns fans, but it's been true. Um, and then anything else for Tampa Bay? Rashad White had a really nice game last week, but not the best matchup for him. The Eagles' run defense has been a lot more solid. I think they ranked third in run defense grade this year. Bucks O line ranks 31st in yards before contact per attempt so far this year. So not ideal matchup for the run game, but confidence in Rashad White at all?
Maybe it's a volume play. I'm not looking for any sort of efficiency. Terrible matchup. Looking to avoid it if I can. But again, like given the injuries that we've sustained over the past week between Nick Chubb, Saquon Bark, like it's been a mess. Probably going to be hard to sit Rashad White with that potential for volume as he's seen it so far. So, if you're not able to sit him again, this is a moment where you maybe look to the flex and, try to have a higher upside option there.
Very fair. All right, let's go to part two of Monday Night Football, and that is the Los Angeles Rams at the Cincinnati Bengals, where we get to see the best wide receiver duo in the NFL. And no, it's not Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, but of course, Puka Nacua and Tutu Atwell. Kate, how you feeling about this Rams passing offense? They have been on fire lately. Are you ready to fire them up again against the Bengals?
I'm so confused by the production we've seen out of the Rams. To be fair, like it hasn't been the most efficient. Like we're seeing a high volume pass attack. Only one receiving touchdown so far for the Rams this year. Like, this has very much been a volume based play. But I do think that Puka Nacua, a fine start. Tutu Atwell, I actually think is a fine start. Despite the fact that he is like you can barely see him. He's like this, an inch big. He's been a total fixture in this Rams pass attack. 196 receiving yards through 2 games, has led the team in routes run, yards per reception, second highest average depth of target on the team. He's played 57.3% of his snaps out wide, which is blowing my mind. Like I thought for sure he would be this gadget guy and play primarily out of the slot. Like, no, he's actually, he's being targeted downfield, 4 targets of 20 or more air yards to lead the entire Rams offense so far through 2 games. The usage, I don't get it, but you know what? It's working for Tutu Atwell. So like, obviously Puka Nacua, you're starting him. But also Tutu Atwell, he's probably much more likely on your waivers than Puka is at this point. So, if you're in need of a flex play, I think Tutu is not a bad start.
Yeah, not a bad one. I would say, like, I think this is probably going to be their toughest matchup of the season so far, at least as far as coverage units go. The Bengals are one of the better units in the league. I mean, they play a lot of man coverage, and they've allowed just 3.39 yards per coverage snap while in man, which is the third best mark in the league. So I think there's potential there that we might not see as big of games from Atwell and Nacua, which it doesn't feel like that hot of a take because they've been absolutely on fire lately, and there's bound to be some regression there. So just something to kind of keep an eye on, but you kind of have to start them. I think they've just been so solid, and the volume has been unbelievable. So the other part of the Rams offense, at least worth talking about, Kyren Williams, who did not care that he was facing the 49ers last week. We talked about that matchup, not liking it for him, and then all he did was finish as the overall PPR RB1 in week 2. Are we done doubting Kyren Williams? Or can we trust him in lineups this week?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, volume-based play is always a great thing. You love to see the involvement there, like the difference in terms of snap production between him and Ronnie, like lights out. Yeah. He is the guy for this offense. You literally don't have to worry about Cam Akers because he's been shipped out of town. But what's really exciting, I think, overall for Kyren Williams is the usage in the receiving game. And that
Mhm.
is going to, I think, like, regardless of matchup, that leaves things wide open in terms of, the ability to generate more touches, even when things go south and you're not maybe able to dedicate as many resources to hashtag establishing the run. Right now, Kyren Williams leads all running backs in routes run for the 2023 season so far. Not necessarily been like uber efficient, but
Mhm.
has been, a top target in this offense. Very weirdly enough, 11 targets on the year. That's tied for the most among all running backs. You love to see that production, and hard to argue with that kind of usage because he's probably going to see 20 touches a game. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, you trust the volume more than anything, and then we worry about the efficiency and things like that after. But as long as the touches are there, that's what's going to create the fantasy points. So still love it. Wheels up for Kyren Williams now, especially with Cam Akers kind of sent off
A
to
sentence I
Minnesota.
never thought I would hear, by the way. Like a year ago, if you would have told me we said wheels up Kyren Williams, I would have told you like, no,
Yeah, what is
no,
going on?
absolutely
Yeah.
not. No, but I'm here for it. I'm here for the Kyren Williams era.
Yeah, I'm with you. And then on the Bengals side of things, Joe Burrow still considered kind of day to day with a calf injury. Not good. I know he suited up for practice this week, but his status has not been cleared up as far as this game. It obviously sucks that it's the last game of the week, so we just have to keep on waiting and hoping. Would you be starting Joe Burrow this week? Do you have a pivot? I guess Matthew Stafford could potentially be a pivot that's available on some waiver wires if you need to.
I'm going to tell you my pivot. We just talked about my pivot, and it's probably Baker
There
Mayfield
you
for
go.
this
Yeah, that's
point.
true.
Like, you know what, Baker Mayfield, he's probably going to be sitting out there on waivers, like I said, unless you are in dire straits and you're not going to, improve things from that standpoint. He's probably going to be sitting on your waiver wire heading into, this Monday Night Football matchup. I think in terms of like you want points, right? Like, and what points you're going to get, and if he does sit, clearly this team's struggling with efficiency.
Mhm.
You don't love to see what we're seeing right now out of this Bengals team. They are not themselves. Joe Burrow is not himself. I would rather like pivot to, like I said, one of these other matchups, a Baker Mayfield, that might provide maybe less upside, but
Mhm.
at least I'm probably going to bank on at least 15 points in that scenario. Plus, I have a plus matchup to hopefully give me a little bit more of a significant upside there.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. And look, if he does play, I think this is a decent matchup as far as like coverage grades go. I mean, the Rams are the lowest graded coverage unit in the league right now at 40.1 PFF coverage grade. So I think if Burrow plays, I think we could maybe potentially get like our first big Jamar Chase game of the year against that Rams secondary. But we're banking on a lot here because Burrow, it just feels questionable. And like you said, the Bengals offense a little bit out of sorts here. So it becomes a little bit more difficult to trust it. And we just haven't seen it from Jamar Chase yet, even though we know that it's coming. It'll happen at some point. I feel pretty good that it could happen this week if Burrow plays, but it's a big question. It's a big if Burrow plays.
It is a big if. And another reason why I like Baker Mayfield also, that Monday night matchup. Hopefully, we have some more clarification by that point about Burrow's status, about how healthy he is, if he is intending to play. But if not, Baker Mayfield also plays on Monday Night Football, albeit the game before him. But
Mm-hmm.
that provides fantasy managers a little bit more extra room to pivot
True.
just in case. But if Burrow's out, obviously you still start Jamar Chase, you still start T Higgins, but you're not going to expect nearly what I think you came into this season expecting from both of them.
Yeah, for sure. And then we should get the Bengals inactives before kickoff for the Bucks and Eagles as well. So that helps for sure, making that decision. But yeah, that's going to do it for another big preview episode. Hopefully we covered all the key fantasy information that people were looking for heading into week 3. And if not, there are plenty of articles on pff.com that can help you out as well. Kate, thank you as always for doing this with me. I greatly appreciate it. And speaking of articles up on pff.com, please let everybody know what you have up there this week.
Yeah, absolutely. This week, been working on the PFF rushing report. So taking some of those key stats and information from week 2 and projecting forward to week 3 and seeing what we might be able to take away, maybe some values. And then also look for my in case of emergency waiver wire pickups coming out on Friday.
Nice. And then as for me, you could find the IDP fantasy report, IDP rankings, O-line, D-line matchups to target and avoid. The wide receiver man and zone coverage report is up as well now. Nate and I will be back to recap week 3, either Sunday night or Monday morning. We haven't quite figured that one out yet, but either way, hope you'll tune in and check it out. Thank you all for listening. And until next time, peace out.